Starting early tonight. Getting going at 8:31. We didn't wait till 8:32 or 8:33 or anything like that. We started early at 8:31 to go on the this week's live Panther-Lair Show. I'm going to check and make sure I have the right microphone plugged in. Looks like I do. Hooray for me. Way to get that going right off the bat. And yeah, feel like we got a lot to talk about tonight. Although it's a challenging spot right now, and I'll bring in Jim in a minute to ask him about this. But like, we're on the message boards all day. I've posted, I don't even know, a dozen times or something today, maybe more, maybe less. I'm working on the 3-2-1 column that we'll publish on Panther-Lair.com on Friday, and obviously writing about basketball stuff. And like, I got to be honest, after writing about the game last night, at the game, and then writing about, we do sort of our follow-up thing, the 3-pointers, where we pick sort of 3 things that stood out from the game. And I just found like, just writing about the same damn things every game. Like it's kind of, I don't want to say it's like getting boring, but it's getting a little bit exhausting just writing about, again, oh, look, they got out rebounded. Oh, look, they got off to a slow start. Oh, look, another, opposing player went off for big points, out of career game. And all this. Like, it's the same thing in every one of these losses. And they should have won last night. They should have won on Saturday. They should have won, the game at Wake Forest. They should have won, the Clemson game. I mean, like, you could run down a list of like 5 or 6 games that this team should have won, but they didn't. And every time they didn't, it's usually for the same reason. Last night it was Duncan Powell and Pitt getting out rebounded by 10. The Notre Dame game, it was what guy was it? Cole Serta or whoever it was, and Pitt trailing in the first. I mean, like, it's every game, and it's just sort of, it's wearing you. I shouldn't say it's wearing me down or getting exhausted. It's just like, how can I come up with something new to write about this team right now? It's just kind of running out of fresh topics. So hopefully you guys have things you want to talk about here on the live show tonight as people start filtering in as we get going. Hopefully you have some comments and questions so we can have a little back and forth. We'll obviously talk about Pitt basketball throughout the evening here. Panthers with 3 more games left in the regular season. Saturday at Louisville, Tuesday, or maybe it's Wednesday at NC State. I think they have a game next Wednesday night. So we'll have to make a plan for that. And then the finale against Boston College at home. We'll see where Pitt ends up in the ACC tournament and kind of what comes of that. But I mean, coming up to the end of the season, it came so fast, and yet the season seems so long. And then shortly, after that, or pretty much, the week of the ACC tournament, Pitt will start spring football. So we have some football stuff we can talk about as well. If you have comments or questions about football, we can dive into that. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content, our daily morning Pitt videos, a weekly live show that we have right here every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. And post-game shows, press conferences, interviews, all those different things. We have it at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Let's bring Jim in here if I can find the button. James, do you feel like we're running out of new things to write about with this team?
In a way, yes, because I feel like even the past couple 3-2-1 columns I've had, I've kind of come down to the same things or the same talking points, and you brought them up in your opening. It's like, yeah, they get out rebounded. Yeah, the other team's 3rd or 4th best player scores 25 points. They get off to slow starts. I mean, they just do all these same things repeatedly. And I mean, I guess that's just who they are at this point. I mean, I don't know why we're expecting anything different at this point. I mean, for pretty much since January 1st, this is exactly who this team has been. So I don't know at this point. I mean, they have a tough game on Saturday against Louisville. And I mean, there's probably the first time in 3 years I've gone into a game thinking Pitt has absolutely no chance of winning this game. Absolutely none. There is not a prayer that they're going to win this game. So I don't know. I mean, that's just kind of what it's been lately. I mean, it's every time they find a way to dig this hole, they make this valiant comeback. Jaland Lowe hits a 3 with 1:15 left. It's oh, they might pull it out. No, the other team scores the final 6 points of the game, and you lose again. So I don't know. You are what you are. What are they? 16-12 at this point. I mean, it just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, it's 9 games this season. They've scored 30 points or less in the first half. 9 out of 28. You can't 1 out of every 3 games you're scoring 30 or less. Now they actually won 2 of those. They beat LSU after scoring 27 points in the first half. They beat Virginia Tech after scoring 28 in the first half. The last 7 games when they scored 30 or less in the first half, they've lost every single one of them. And like there was the Duke game where they got blown out, but like the Clemson game, they scored 30 points in the first half of the Clemson game. If you literally score one more point, conceivably you win in regulation, right? Because that game went to overtime. There was another one too, not Virginia or SMU, because they got slaughtered. But I mean, Notre Dame, they scored 30 points in the first half at Notre Dame, and they end up losing by 4, right? They scored 30 points in the first half last night, and they end up losing by 6. If you're just like moderately competent, and I would say if you scored 35 points in the first half, you are moderately competent. That's not great, right? I would say you have to get into the 40s to have a really good first half. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think if you're like scoring 35-ish, I mean, I think that's kind of where you want to be.
Yeah, it's fine. It's not great, but it's like a 7-win season. It's like, well, that's fine. You're fine. But I mean, like, you actually have to like get into the 40s to be good. If they actually scored in the 40s, they'd win most, they would win the Clemson game. They would win the Notre Dame game. They would win the Georgia Tech game. And now we're talking about a team that's like 19-9 as opposed to 16-12. And we have a very different perspective on everything right now. But instead, I mean, just can't figure out. And it's hard because the slow starts are so much of it is connected to all these other problems, right? Like the rebounding, it's the defense, it's the inefficient offense. And but here it's kind of like you said with the 3-2-1 column, you said you find yourself like just kind of writing a lot of the same things. And I was planning out this week's 3-2-1 column, and I was like, yeah, maybe I'll write about the center position. I'm like, no, I did that 2 weeks ago. I'm like, well, maybe I'll write about the rebounding. No, I probably did that 2 weeks ago. Like some of the column, at least one section, if not two, is just going to be about how I'm writing about the same things. And I'm just kind of tired of repeating the same things. There was an interesting comment on the message boards tonight that I was interacting with before the show started. And, I think it was Pitt Chag, smart guy, very, what's the word? Prolific poster on the message board. Sorry, I knew there was a word that started with P. So, he posts a lot, but he's got a lot of interesting insight. And he said, in the course of a debate with another poster, at certain points, I felt like this year's Pitt team was better than last year's Pitt team. And I thought that was interesting because I asked, what changed? Like, was it? So, Jim, I would ask you that question. Do you feel like this team had a point where they obviously by the record, right? They were 12-2. They beat Ohio State. They had the win over West Virginia. They were off to such a hot start in the ACC. What changed? Did guys get worn down? The level of competition increase? What do you think? Where was the downshift?
I mean, obviously, like level of competition went up like immediately after that 12-2 start. You went right into Duke and Louisville, and like obviously Duke gave it to them, and I don't know if that messed with their confidence, but like following that Duke game, like they had a winnable home game against Louisville, and it felt like the one they should win. It felt like one they were going to win, and they just let it slip away. And I don't know if losing back-to-back games, if that kind of wore on them, but it just never got any better after that. I mean, even the games they won, it's not like anything like, oh, great, you beat Syracuse by 4. Like, oh, you beat Miami, and they have 6 wins this year. I mean, like, they haven't played well in pretty much since December 30th, or whenever the Stanford game was. So, or January 4th. January 4th was the last time this team, and even then they started slow. They had one of those slow starts and had a big second half. So I don't know what it is. I don't know what changed for this team, because when you watch them play early, like looking back on it now, Ohio State's not a great team, but like that was still a gutty win. Like you look at Wisconsin, like that's a top 15 team right there. They were right there with them. It's just like, it's kind of hard to explain. And, they talk so much in the preseason about like, leave no doubt. This is the mantra this year. Like, we remember what happened last year. I think they had on their locker room, like the picture of the Final Four teams missing the tournament from last year. And like, that was it. That was supposed to be the motivating factor. Like, they were supposed to take that personally. And there's so many guys back from last year's team. And there's also veterans they added that understand what it makes to get into the tournament. So it's just puzzling that like a couple bad losses in January just kind of sunk the whole ship.
I mean, you backdated to that Duke game. That's when Damian Dunn came back. What do you in retrospect now that Damian Dunn's his second return is over, what's the did it throw them off? Do you feel like it? I don't think they were going to win the Duke game whether Damian Dunn was back or not. Did he throw off the chemistry for the Louisville game? They scored 44 points in the second half of that one. The Florida State game, they scored 47 in the second half. Kind of looking through, I mean, they had the Clemson game, they outscored them by 10 in the second half. But I mean, do you think Damian Dunn's they got adjusted to not having done, and then when he came back, it threw off whatever they had established during that 7 games or whatever that he was gone?
I mean, there's some, you can look at it that way for sure. I mean, I think Capel has even said, he was not the same player when he came back, and, we're not the same team whenever he got hurt the second time. Each time it changed them in a little bit of a different way. So I don't know. I mean, the thing with this team is, and I don't know, they're 26 games into this or 28 games into it, they're still tinkering with the lineup. They still haven't found the right combination. They still haven't gotten a solid, okay, we know you're coming off the bench and you're going to play 15 minutes. We know you're subbing in for this guy. It changed throughout the whole season. There was never that consistent play. So I don't know, whenever Dunn went down, everyone, stood to reason. It's okay, Brandon Cummings is going to play a lot, and he's going to be better for it. Whenever Dunn comes back, they're going to have both of these guards, and they're already going to have Lowe and Leggett, and they're going to have these 4 great guards, and they're just going to be really good in the ACC play. And it just never worked out that way, because when Dunn came back, Cummings just stopped playing. So they never developed that extra depth. I mean, they just kind of stuck with, for the most part, I mean, they've played 6 to 7 guys all year, and I know we've asked Jeff Capel about bench usage, and sometimes that merits a good response, sometimes it doesn't. But I mean, it's worth asking. I mean, you have this team, and sometimes the starters are not playing well. They're not playing good defense, and you sit the bench guys for not playing good defense. I mean, it's kind of it's a double standard. I mean, you have guys you're benching, but the guys on the floor are doing the exact same thing. So I don't know. I mean, I think part of it is usually by mid-January, you want to have okay, this is our 7-8 man guy rotation. This is what we do. They just never got into that rhythm, and for whatever reason.
And I even think if Dunn had stayed healthy, we'd still be having the same conversation. You know what I mean? I guess either Dunn would be the 6th man, or at the start of the season, Zach Austin was the 6th man, right? He wasn't starting, but I mean, it would still just be those 6 guys. It would still be Lowe, Leggett, Dunn, Austin, Guillermo, and Cam Corhan that are playing. I don't think it was for whatever reason, he was always going to have this limited bench. And we got sucked into it again. We did it again, just like we've done it every year, where we're in mid-December. We're no, this will be the year where the bench goes 8 deep all season long. And it happened again. And I just don't I think we talk about this, a million times. I always hesitate on personnel stuff. We don't have all the information the coaches have. They see these guys a lot more. Their job is to win. They want to put the guys out there that give them the best chance to win. I just don't see how it benefited the team at all through November and December. Once everybody was healthy, obviously Amsal Delilich, his injury set him back. And that probably had more of an impact than any of us have really given it credit, that time that he missed and not being out there. But there was still plenty of time in December, you know what I mean, to get him on the court. When did he come back? He came back in December, didn't he?
Yeah, he only missed the first couple games.
Right. So there was plenty of time to get him on the court. There's plenty of time to get Brandon Cummings on the court. There was plenty of time to get Jorge Diaz-Graham on the court and have these guys actually up to speed that they can give you quality minutes. They've gotten 5 points off the bench in the last 2 games combined. That's, I mean, last night was a weird game because there were 3 total bench points scored between both teams, but 5 total bench points in the last 2 games for Pitt. I just refuse to believe that those guys are that bad, that they can't help you in some way.
That's what I mean. And whenever we talk about using the bench more, it's not that I'm saying those guys are better than the starters. I mean, it's just that you need a complete team. Some of those guys shouldn't be logging 38, 39 minutes a game. There should be some balance. I think there's a lot to be said for rest and usage, and just how these guys are deployed. And I mean, you just have so many guys playing 36 minutes a night, and like you can tell they're fatigued. And like there were certain games, like that Louisville game, that's kind of when this first thing started. That was the first time like he didn't use the bench in the second half. And I remember asking him about it. He's like, no, like we were good. Like, and you could kind of tell, like, no, you weren't. Like Louisville shot like 60% in the last 10 minutes. Like you weren't good. You weren't getting stopped. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's not that like they're sitting on this like gold mountain of talent on the bench that's like obvious. It's like you just need a complete team. You need to just kind of balance these guys out, because you look at guys like Jaland Lowe, it's like he struggled this year, but like it looks like in his head he has to do so much. And I don't know why he has to feel like that's his burden. I don't know if it's point guard or the expectations this season, but like I still think Jaland Lowe's a good basketball player. I think he just kind of got caught in a situation where it felt like he had to do everything, and I don't think he needed to feel that way.
Yeah, I agree. Was it on Monday the ACC coaches teleconference that Capel referenced, like how Notre Dame, that Marcus Burton played 38 minutes. They weren't taking him up, but I mean, they were down. They were missing guys. Like Notre Dame had to play those guys, and they still got a bench guy to go into double figures, even though they were down. They're two of their top scorers.
Yeah,
they still, they played Burton a lot, but they still had a guy come off the bench and score in double figures. It was funny. I was going back and trying to like track all the guys who had like career highs or season highs against Pitt. It's not as many as we think, but it's still like a not insignificant number. It doesn't happen every game. I forget the list that I came up. I mean, like some of them I had to stretch, like, oh, he made a season high, or the only times
like Day Ames for Virginia comes to mind.
Yeah, he averaged 8.2. He scored 27 against Pitt. Tyler Johnson averaged 6.1. He had 17 against Pitt. That was the season high. And he made 2 threes in a game for the 5th time in his career. Dylan Hunter was in double figures against Pitt for just the 2nd time against an ACC opponent in his career. Mississippi State's forward Keyshawn Murphy averages less than 12 points per game. He scored 20 against Pitt. Chris Bell at Syracuse had season highs with 23 points and 7 made threes. Cole Serta, the bench guy at Notre Dame, scored 12 points. He's averaging 2 points per game and had 2 made 3-pointers all season. And then he had 3 against Pitt. Obviously, Duncan Powell last night. So there's a bunch of these guys. Not it felt like it happens every game. It doesn't happen every game, but there are a bunch of them. But as I was looking back through and tracking this, it was remarkable to me how many games where the opponent had a bench player get to double figures. Like, it's not that weird to be able to rely on your bench. And it comes back to that question of like, okay, you either have poor roster construction. Clearly you have a lack of trust in those guys. And it's either because A, you put the roster together poorly, or B, you haven't developed them well, right? It's one or the other. And I'm not sure which one it is. It's probably a combination of both. But I guess there's a third alternative, right? That you're scared. You don't think you can trust them. You're frightened of taking your starters off the court. But I'm not going to say it answers everything. I think there's a few things that do answer everything. I don't think that's necessarily it, but I think it would probably help them,
Like, undoubtedly. I mean, you look, like, who are their best outside shooters? Like, I mean, obviously Zach Austin's having a good season, but like, I don't know. Like, I would trust Brandon Cummings making a wide open 3. He had a big one last night. Like, Jorge Diaz-Graham at a certain point was like hitting like 60% from threes, like something absurd. Like, you had like you're a team that struggles offensively. You get on these long offensive spells in the first half where you're down 22-6 and you can't buy a bucket, and you're keeping your best 3-point shooters on the bench. It just doesn't make sense to me sometimes.
Michael B is a super chatter. I want to bring him in here because he put his super chat in a while ago and been delaying getting to it. Hi, Chris and Jim. If Jeff Capel returns for an 8th year, won't the vast amount of empty seats at the Peterson Event Center cost Pitt more than a negotiated buyout? Also, isn't the Amsal-Delalich situation one of the strangest you've seen at Pitt? I don't know how the money would balance out, Jim, between empty seats and buyout money. There was a post on the board from somebody saying like, I'm going to withhold I forget how much his annual donation was, $1,500 or $1,600 or maybe $3,000. I forget what it was, but somehow he worked out the math that if 1,600 people withheld their annual donation of an X amount, it would cover the entirety of the buyout or potential buyout or whatever it is. And like, first of all, I don't see Pitt fans mobilizing that well. They can't even get like 100 people to join Alliance 412 to help stack these teams with talent. I don't think they're going to get 1,600 people. Even if like the call to action is don't give money, I don't think they're going to need 1,600 people to do it. But I don't know how the money all balances out with the seats. It's obviously a very sort of like visible and visceral and tangible kind of barometer on the program. You know, when you have as many empty seats as they had last night, as many empty seats as they'll have on Saturday, next Saturday for the Boston College game, it's going to be dead in there. But I don't think that balances out, because the other, like, a new coach, you're not going to all of a sudden have 12,500 people showing up every game either. You know, that was supposed to happen with Capel, and it didn't. You know, the last few years of the Jamie Dixon era and the 2 years of Kevin Stallings killed the fan base enough that even when Capel, who everyone loved as a hire, there was so much excitement around the program, they still didn't fill the place, you know, unless it was a big time opponent. So I don't think there's anything, I don't think that balance. I don't know. Do you think it balances out, or would, compel Alan Green to action here?
I mean, I would think like the place would have to be like an absolute ghost town for like anyone to really notice. Like, so I think someone else on the board said today, it's like, oh, it'll be the 8th straight season it's been dead in there. I'm like, I don't know. There was a distinct difference between like the crowds of like 2022 and like the crowds last year and this year. I mean, like, they've been okay like lately. Like, I don't think it's been like dead at the Pete or anything. It's not like when it was. Well,
I don't know, man. Like last night, Carl Krauser. God love Carl Krauser, who is loud. His voice carries, no question about it. You know, the man can project, Carl Krauser. He was over, that row of baseline seats that like kind of flank the TV crew. He was standing like behind them in the far corner, like from the press area. If you look to your left, in the far corner behind that row of seats, and I could hear him yelling to the players as they were on the court, like, come on, Jaland, you got to drive there. Come on, Cam, screen, do this, do that. So like, that doesn't happen if you have a few thousand bodies in there to absorb the sound. You can't hear somebody yelling from all the way on the other side of it was bad. It's bad. That place.
Well, yeah. I meant like,
it was a ghost
overall, like the past like 3 years are not like 2019. Like some of the, like,
okay. So yeah, there were more people there last night than there were during the COVID year. I'll give you that.
2019, the COVID wasn't even a thing yet. But
I'm saying the next one, the 2020-21. There were more people at the game last night than there were at the games in 2020, 2021. I'll give you that.
Fair, but like I was at that game whenever like Louisville put up like 105 to 50, and like those years, those were some pretty. Yeah, like, those were the type of crowds that got Kevin Stallings fired. So yeah, like they would have to be like those kind of crowds.
See, but even then, like. The crowds didn't get him fired. Like going 0-18 got him fired. Like a disastrous, like awful personal working relationship with him and Heather Lyke got him fired. Like him being just what I presume on a professional level to be a very unlikable person to work with got him fired. Like, if they went like 6-12 with the bad crowds, because like that was one where like it was doomed from the start. You know what I mean? Like nobody wanted that higher. And so nobody was going to those games. And it didn't matter what didn't they beat Virginia? Didn't Stallings have a win over like Virginia? I want to say.
I mean, I remember the game they scored 9 points against Virginia in the first half.
Well, that was the second year, Jim.
Okay.
That wasn't the first year. I think in his first year, I want to say they hold on. I have the media guide right here. He had a big win. There was 1 point. So that would have been
one time in 65 games, he had a good one.
Overtime, 88-76, January 4th, 2017. Kevin Stallings beat Virginia, who was ranked number 11 at that point. And it was a win at home. And then they went on the road. They went on the road and lost at Syracuse and lost at Louisville. And I forget if that game, that might have been. Yeah, they didn't play at Louisville the next year. Oh, no, they did play at Louisville the next year. I thought maybe that might have been we didn't pay $100,000 for our players. Remember that when he yelled that at the fans? So that might have happened the next year when they lost by like 22. But yeah, after that win over Virginia, they lost Syracuse, Louisville, Miami, NC State, Louisville, Clemson, North Carolina, and Duke. So how many games in a row is that? So he beat Virginia and then lost 8 in a row. But anyway, Kevin Stallings had a good win.
I was just gonna say, I was looking at that team and we're talking about no benches. Like that first Stallings team where it was like, okay, Jamel Artis, you're the point guard. And like that was like they just played those 5 guys. Like that was it.
That's right. They lost to Duquesne that year. Like Pitt fans who were talking about how bad, like, dude lost to. There used to be somebody on Twitter whose like username was he lost to Duquesne. Like, and I was like, yeah, that kind of says it already. But I think was Artis suspended for that game? I think Jamel Artis didn't play.
I think you're right.
Game. Yeah. But anyway, I don't know how we got off on this sidetrack of reminiscing about Kevin. Oh, but I mean, so he had a big win, but it's still like it did nothing, probably because he lost 8 games in a row after that and had already lost to Duquesne and SMU earlier that season after barely eking past Eastern Michigan in double overtime in his first game as Pitt head coach. Forgot that. I had no memory of that. I don't know if you do, but oh my God, the next year they lost to Navy and Montana to open the season. The 0-18 year. Wow.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
That's bad. Bad stuff. But anyway, the crowd sucked last night. There was nobody there. They didn't care. There was no energy in the place. Brandon Cummings 3, they got a little bit fired up. Jaland Lowe's 3, they tied the game. People got fired up, but that was minimal. Our good friend DT Pitt sits in front of me, and he got excited for those threes, and he also he had seen enough by the end of that one. The other part of Michael B's question here is the Amsal Delilich situation one of the strangest you've seen at Pitt? It sort of feels like Greg Cross a little bit this year. Does Greg Cross predate you, Jim? 2008 Pitt football? Is that reference too old for you?
No, he had that awesome touchdown run against Iowa.
Damn sure did. That dude. But I mean, I don't know. Is that like the equivalent or like Ryan Murphy for more recent like Pitt basketball? Like, oh, this guy, or like Ethiel Horton. Horton actually played though. Like this is a situation where this guy's not even getting on the court. Murphy played a decent amount. Did Murphy start? Is he a starter for Kevin Stallings?
Yeah, or at least some games.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. Can you think of something weirder than this situation where like so much hype, so much seeming potential and, you know, proven at a high level of basketball and can't even get off the bench?
Nothing's like coming to like, I'm trying to like Jamie Dixon, like his last year, he had Damon Wilson. Like, I think he was a 4-star and like he wasn't good.
Yeah. Yes.
Like that somewhat comes to mind, but I don't know, like maybe in our head, like maybe if you listen to this podcast, like we built up Delilich too much. I don't know. I'm not going to take the blame for it in any way.
I'll take the blame for it and I'll stand by that we weren't wrong. Everyone else was wrong, not us. And it said he got hurt. If he hadn't gotten hurt, man, they'd be 19-9 right now.
At least.
You know what? If Jaland Lowe was either a little bit better of a 3-point shooter, a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit, and was just a little bit better decision making of not forcing it. Like I think that could be a difference for this team. And like I actually just and I don't know why I poke the hornet's nest with like this, but I you know, there's another post on the board today about like, you know, it's just misery from here on out. And I was like, look, I'm just spitballing here, but like, imagine a universe where, you know, let's say everybody, you know, that you want to come back does come back. Let's say the point guard gets just a little bit better at 3-point shooting, not a lot, but just a little, and gets a decent amount better with decision making. Let's say the 2 really promising freshmen just develop as freshmen would do from their first to second years, and they bring in a talented wing. I don't think there's any reason that team shouldn't or wouldn't win 20 games, right? I mean, like, they've had a lot of disappointing games here, a lot of disappointing losses, and even a couple 3 blowouts, right? I don't know. Would you call Florida State a blowout? It was a 12-point game, but
no, they kind of like at least got it close for a little while. But...
yeah. But I mean, Duke, SMU, Virginia, those were blowout losses. But otherwise, you know, out of their other 9 losses, they weren't, well, Mississippi State was a blowout loss. Let's just stick to the ACC here. Out of their 10 losses, 3 were blowouts. The other 7 were not blowout losses. A little bit better decision making from the point guard. If you take all those sort of what ifs that I just laid out there, the point guard, the freshman, and bring in a talented wing, you put them in those situations, they probably win most of those 7 games. At least 3 or 4 to get them into 19 or 20 wins with a few games left to play. I guess my point is, like, obviously the line between winning and losing is very small and all that stuff, but like I can see a path where they could be better. And it's probably a conversation about why they've struggled as much as they have and why they haven't been better. And whether you put it all on, Cam Corrin, or whether you put it all on the rebounding, you put it all on Jaland Lowe, wherever it is. But like, I think you could expect some natural progression from Lowe from this year to next year, assuming he comes back. And I don't say that because I think he's going anywhere. It's just because it's what you have to say about every player these days. But assuming he comes back, assuming Cummings comes back, assuming Delalich comes back, those guys should all get better, like within a reasonable amount, right?
I would think so. And I mean, like, even to your point with Jaland Lowe, like, he's 35 from 3 last year. He's 27 this year. Like, if he splits the difference, he's shooting like 31, 32 this year, which still isn't a good percentage. It's better. It might make a difference in some of those like 1 or 2 possession losses. So, I mean, like, we've seen Jaland Lowe play good basketball throughout his 2 years at Pitt. Like, there's been times this year where he's been really good. Even recently, he's had some good games. Like, it's just like, I think a lot of it just gets compounded because they're bad. And it's like, oh, he's been bad all season. He's been terrible every game. And like, I mean, like, you remember early in the, like, he won them the Ohio State game. Like, he like scored like all those points in the final 5 minutes. Leggett fouled out. Like, it was him. And like, that was supposed to be a big showcase for him. And like, he played this great game on national TV. And I don't know, like, it's just been inconsistent ever since. And I can't put my finger on why it's been that way for him. But like, I don't know, like, when I watched him as a freshman, there was times when I thought he was better than Bob. Like, and he was a better player at times last year. So I don't know. I still think there's a good player in there. And like, if he were to come back and, like you said, we have to say it that way. Like, I think he could be a good college point guard next year.
I mean, he had 8 assists last night, and probably should have had double-digit assists if, like, or Guillermo and Zach Austin make more than 2 total threes. I think they were combined 2 of 11 from 3. He had some nice dishes. He made some nice plays. So I mean, like, last night was sort of a microcosm of exactly what you're talking about. Where, what was he, 2 of 9 from 3? He shouldn't be attempting 9 3-pointers in a game. He shouldn't be forcing those shots up. That's a big problem. But then he's making nice passes. He's making nice assists. I don't think he's a great shooter, and he's probably not gonna be a great shooter. Would you say he was last year? 35% or something like that? Like, I don't think he's gonna be in that range. That's probably not where he's gonna be. But if he's 31, 30, but with a lower volume, and he's working more on distributing, if he's not forcing those threes, if he's able to kind of use his driving ability to create opportunities to kick out to shooters, to kick out to Guillermo, to kick out to Jorge, to kick out to Brandon Cummings, to kick out to himself, Delalich, like the assist numbers will go up. I think he runs into a problem of trying to force it, where he feels like he needs to be the guy to make those plays. And I think it was all in last night's game. Like, the really poor 3-point shooting and then the huge clutch shots, the drive and kicks for some great assists, and also just forcing these weird mid-range jumpers and forcing a pass to Ishmael Leggett on a fast break where he gets under the hoop and he should just finish the layup, and he makes some weird pass. It bounces off of Leggett's hands. It was all kind of there. And I guess he's playing like a sophomore, right? I mean, he's playing like a young player, making some of the young player mistakes, which I'm with you. I think the talent is there. He's just got to find his role and kind of learn how to live in it. RJC Man 38 is a super chatter. He says Cable has lost the team, the fans, and the students. Pitt must create a change now. I don't know. I don't know. Doesn't really do any good for me to say they should fire him or not fire him. It's not going to bring anybody more to the game. The Boston College game, it's not like they're going to sell it out if they fire Jeff Capel right now. And if they fired him in the offseason and hired, it doesn't matter who they hire. They're not going to fill out the arena until they win and win a lot for multiple years. When we talked about the Oakland Zoo and how much of a hit that took from the end of the Jamie Dixon era and the 2 years of Kevin Stallings and the first 4 years of Capel, like that doesn't get rebuilt with just one hire. Now, and maybe some of these guys would say we're just kicking the can down the road, but whatever that might be, like, I don't know. I think this team they should have won more games this year as they're currently constructed. And I think they can win more games next year if they can, add a wing, right? RJ Seaman 38 also says who wants to play for Capel. He's seen as a lame duck. I don't know who's seeing him as a lame duck. I'm not sure what recruits are thinking about it. But I keep saying about adding a wing, Jim. Would that be the main portal priority? Like a 4 type of wing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would make sense. And I think that's what they early on in like the transfer portal efforts last year, that's kind of what they went for. I mean, I think the guy that ended up at Miami was it Brandon Johnson. Obviously, they had a Duke Theoro. Like there was a lot of like 4s they went after, and they just never landed any of them. So I mean, obviously that's something they prioritized last year, and they really wanted. And maybe with one of those guys, this is a better team. But I mean, I look at the team, not last year's team, but 2 years ago. They had multiple shooters. They had different guys that could, make threes whenever, Nelly Cummings drove in the lane. It's like, okay, Greg Elliott's in one corner and Blake Hinson's in the other corner. I mean, I think just trying to create as many shooting options for Jaland Lowe, whenever he goes and does what he does. And sometimes it's crazy, but like if he turns around and there's a great shooter there spotting up for a 3, then all the craziness kind of makes sense. Like the wild pass to the corner. Okay, that's fine because you have Greg Elliott or Blake Hinson there. I mean, like, I really think like adding 3-point shooting is a big thing for this team. I think they just need more weapons on the outside.
So, I mean, put a lineup out there next year of Jaland Lowe Jr., Brandon Cummings sophomore, Amsal Delalich sophomore, Guillermo Diaz-Graham senior, Cam Corrin senior, right? You've now got 4 guys who can shoot from outside to varying degrees of success, but they're all legitimate shooters. You've also got 3 guys who can handle the ball, which I feel like somebody pointed this out somewhere is probably an underrated bit of Damian Dunn's injury is they were cut down to only 2 guys who could really handle the ball, plus Cummings, right? I think if you have 3 guys who at any point could drive, and those guys could also pass pretty well, which I think Lowe, Cummings, and Delalich can do, again, with varying degrees, but I think they're all pretty decent passers. Like, I think that's a dangerous offense. 4 shooters, 3 drives, 3 dribblers, 3 ball handlers. You're probably not going to be that much better at rebounding, although I think Amsal might be. Well, he's not going to be an upgrade over Zach Austin, but I think he's a pretty good rebounder, probably better than he gets credit for. But I think your offense is going to be that much more effective with those guys if they make the natural sort of progression that I expect them to. I think that could be a good offense with good shooters and good ball handlers, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think having 2 guys out there that can create would make a difference. I mean, you look at last year, it was Jalen and Bub. 2 years ago, it was Burton and Cummings. I think having 2 guys that you can run your offense through, like, yeah, like Ish Lega can handle the ball and like he could dribble it down the court. No one's going to steal it off him. But like, you're typically not going to run offense with like Ish up front. Like he is who he is. He's going to the basket. That's just Ish's game. He's not really looking to set up people. I think even Capel got asked earlier in the year and like, why are his assist numbers up there? I think he answered. He's like, people aren't expecting him to pass.
Yeah,
that was it. Like so, like that's how he got his assists this year. But yeah, I think having 2 playmakers like Burton and Cummings, like that team 2 years ago, just having 2 guys, I think they both averaged over 4 assists. I mean, you had different ways you could kind of just attack defenses. So I think this team, like under Capel, plays its best whenever it has 3 guards on the court, but especially 2 like almost point guards on the floor.
And I think with Lowe, Cummings, and Delalich, you could potentially have like 3, again, to varying degrees. I'm not saying Delalich is every bit the point guard that Jaland Lowe is or Brandon Cummings or whatever, but 3 guys who conceivably could be point guards. I think if you put and that's not just my like weird Amsal Delalich fandom. I think he can handle that. And like that game, which game was it? The
Miami, I think.
Was it the Miami game, right? Like he was playing the point. Like he was effectively the point guard. At points, he was running the offense in that game, and yet we've hardly seen him since. OB is a super chatter, says, why hasn't Pitt had a good wide receiver recruit since Jordan Addison? Any optimism that'll change? I think Kenny Johnson was a really good wide receiver recruit. He's just been criminally underused in his 2 years at Pitt thus far. He had 70 targets last year, which actually is a lot. That would be a lot if it was a Frank Signetti offense, but it wasn't. It was a Cade Bell offense where they threw the ball a ton. There's no reason that Kenny Johnson should be third on the team in targets as he was a year ago. No disrespect to Raphael Williams, but he should not have more targets than Kenny Johnson. I think Kenny Johnson is a really good he was a really good recruit. I think he's a really good receiver, and I think he will be good. And I think they've also, they got Konate Mumfield out of the transfer portal. So, and Mumfield basically came right after Addison left, excuse me, and then Johnson came in the year after that, right? So, right, because Addison came in 2020, Mumfield came in 22, and then Johnson came in 23. So, it hasn't been a ton of guys, but I think they've done okay. They just, I don't know if I see another Jordan Addison. If he's talking about getting another Jordan Addison, those don't come along very often.
Yeah, and the thing with Jordan Addison is like he was like I think on Rivals we just had him as a 3-star. Like he wasn't like this like super duper 5-star recruit. But I remember like whenever like they landed him and you hear the whispers like the Pitt coaches knew like they had something like right away. Like I think whenever he signed, like there was a big sigh of relief. And you remember he signed like the day after everyone else just to kind of mess with everyone. But I think wide receiver recruiting, I don't know if it's helped that they've switched coordinators a bunch lately. I don't know if it's helped they've switched wide receivers coaches a bunch lately. I mean, I think now just with, JJ Laster, there might be like some level of consistency. I think, just talking to recruits the past month, like guys are recognizing Cade Bell's offense and the type of guys they're going after, even the type of guys we have on the visit list already. So, I think it's going to come. I think just kind of that, you lost Mark Whipple and you went right into Frank Signetti, who decided that they were just going to run the ball a lot. So you didn't really attract some guys and you lose to Colin Underwood. And so there just wasn't any kind of consistency for maybe a 2 or 3 year stretch at that wide receiver spot.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Chris is a super chatter, says, Chris, I am tired of Capel and want a new coach. I hear you, man. It's hard when the team's losing. What have they lost now, Jim? They've won like 4 out of the last, how many? 4, 8, 9, 10. So 4 out of the last 14 they've won. Mm-hmm. So they've lost 10 out of the last 14. Stop. When you go 4-10 over a 14 game stretch, everybody's going to be a little bit upset, understandably so. Let's get back into the chats here, and we got another 15 minutes. So if anybody wants to make sure their comment gets read or question gets answered, you can be a super chatter. But Josh Newark jumped in, posted this before 8 o'clock. So Josh has been sitting on this comment for more than an hour. How close are we to Stallings level fan engagement? It seems like whatever goodwill Jeff Capel has earned the past 2 years has evaporated immediately. And I don't even know how much goodwill, like there was goodwill. I think fans were happy with what happened 2 years ago. They were able to kind of set aside some of the disappointment from last season by through the sort of self-righteous indignation of getting left out of the NCAA tournament. But it's still not like people were coming to the games. Like the crowds weren't that good over the last 2 years. And maybe I just have a high standard of all the seats actually having people in them. But it's not like it was all filling up. But I do think whatever goodwill, and I don't think it was as much as people make it out to be, but whatever goodwill was gained in the last 2 years has taken a hit. Is it Kevin Stallings level fan engagement? I don't think so, because I think that was so routine or so just sort of uniformly hated across the board that I don't know if I would compare it to Stallings, but it's not good. Like we talked about, right? It was a ghost town in there last night, and it probably will be next Saturday as well.
Yeah, the way I kind of look at it, from a basketball point of view, is our message boards. We have a football message board and a basketball message board. The basketball message board is smaller in dedicated posters, but they're very passionate. And that group of 20 to 25 guys that talk Pitt basketball all day, every day, nonstop, no matter what, they're mad right now. And you can feel it. And they've been that way for a while. So I mean, like, obviously, like, no matter what, like, football is always going to be more popular at Pitt. Everything suggests it is, but like, there are people that really care about this basketball program, and right now, they're not feeling good. They're pretty dejected, and like, you can feel it. And like you said, like, the crowd wasn't good last night. It's going to be really bad for Boston College. I know, like, I'm planning to go down to Charlotte for the ACC tournament. And, I was talking to some guys. They're like, "Yeah, we're going down. Do you know anyone else?" I was like, "No." Like, why would they? Other than just getting out of Pittsburgh for a couple days. But like, yeah, like, I mean, yeah, you can feel it. Like, right now, like, things aren't great around this program.
Pitt Tough Guy says, just a heads up, proposed resolution sent to the Pitt officers and the Board of Trustees to bar tuition fees, taxes being used for the revenue sharing, the $20.5 million revenue sharing. Interesting. I haven't seen this. I don't know if Pitt Tough Guy is sharing sourced information here or if it was reported. Have you seen anything like this, Jim?
I didn't catch that one.
Yeah, I didn't see it. I don't know, how it's supposed to work, how it's going to work. I think there are schools that will divert university funds to the revenue sharing. I mean, I don't know how the athletic departments are supposed to come up with that money on their own. They barely clear their deficits as it is. So I don't know how they're going to come up with another $20 million without help from the university, but that's not for us to figure out. It'd be interesting if Pitt refuses to allow tuition, fees, taxes from going there. But I think it's probably a little more complicated than we are currently positioned to discuss. But I don't know. Let's see. Scrolling through here. So this is interesting. Benjamin Glazer says, at some point, would Jeff Capel want to save face and seek other employment? What's the exit strategy if you're Jeff Capel? If you're like, screw this, man. These ungrateful people, I took over such a mess from Kevin Stallings. I have given everything I've got here. It's not working out, but like, screw these ungrateful people for it. I'm taking off. First of all, where could he go? And when would be the time to make that jump?
I don't know. I mean, because you remember, like, earlier in the year, before Pitt collapsed, it was like, oh, Jeff Capel has interest in the Virginia job, and maybe he's eyeing that up, and like, he always valued that program really highly. Like, I don't know if he has that kind of job opportunity lined up after this one. I mean, like, I don't know where he could go. Like, it would be like going like backwards. It'd be like going back down to like VCU or something like that. I mean, like, that's the type of job he would be looking at. But at the same time, I mean, I don't know. Like, does he agree to a reduced buyout or a buyout over time, or does he do it this offseason? Does he want to give it one more try just to, see if he can do it? I don't know. I don't know what the guy's thinking. I don't know what Pitt's thinking. But I'm operating under the assumption that Jeff Capel's going to be the head coach next year. I mean, I don't want to burst anyone's bubble. That could obviously change. But as of right now, what is today? February 26th, I still expect Jeff Capel to be the head coach next season. So,
wait, there was one. Pitt Beat WVU says, I'm really hoping this is the first athletic director in my lifetime that won't set Pitt football back another decade. Well, sir, if you're 31 years old, there's been at least one Pitt athletic director in your lifetime who did not set Pitt football back a decade. And that was Steve Peterson, who hired Walt Harris and actually saved the Pitt football program, resurrected it. And you might not like tearing down the stadium. You might not like changing the uniforms. You might not like changing the logo and all these different things. But hiring Walt Harris 31 years ago, or 32 now, right? Because this is 2025. Wait, no. Oh, my math is terrible, Jim. 28 years ago, right? Back to 1997. That'll be 28 years ago.
Yeah.
God, that means I started college almost 30 years ago. Dang. Steve Peterson hiring Walt Harris 28 years ago very much did not set Pitt football back 10 years. That brought Pitt football forward. And, I don't know. It's probably hyperbole to say save the program, but that was a pretty big move. So not every athletic director in your lifetime, Pitt Beat WVU, has set the football program back. I don't know if Jeff Long set the football program back at all. He didn't really do anything. So I don't think he had much of an impact. Steve Peterson, the second time around, he set him back because the Mike Haywood hire went haywire. And how has nobody ever made that pun before, like Haywood, Haywire.
I like to think somebody has at some point.
Everybody was all caught up in the Haymaker
Yeah.
pun with Mike Haywood, and obviously the Todd Graham thing.
What's he doing now? Did he ever get back into coaching?
Todd Graham?
No, Haywood. Or is that like the end of him?
He's doing something. Might be like a high school or something like that. I forget, or junior college. Scott Barnes didn't really set back Pitt football. You're talking about setting Pitt football back another decade. Scott Barnes didn't do anything bad to Pitt football. Scott Barnes was probably a better athletic director than most people give him credit for because of the Kevin Stallings debacle. But that's kind of a hard one to live down and overcome. You can't really get past that one. Let's see. Pittwin says, I'm hearing it's only a matter of time before the Steelers and Pitt go their separate ways. They say either the Steelers are going to buy out Pitt or leave. Where would Pitt go? I mean, I would say if like some separation of facilities and stadiums came about, I would say it would be the Steelers leaving the South Side and the North Side to go somewhere else for a brand new stadium and a brand new facility. Wouldn't you assume that would be how it happened, Jim?
I think the first thing that will happen will be the Steelers are going to build like a super nice practice facility, like out in like the North Hills, like the Penguins have. Okay. Like I could see that happening. But I mean, like you look down at the North Shore, like they own all that stuff. Like they have a vested interest to stay there. Like everyone's like, oh, they're going to build one of these domes like out in Washington County. And like, I don't know, like they have a lot tied up in the North Shore. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think the stadium arrangement's going to change, but I could see the practice facility split happening at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Scroll through here. See what else. Some of these things we talked about. Some of these things are responding to some other comments. Hustle Westbrook has some comments here. Not having a big to help on defense, leading to needing to double, and the weak side defense always too slow, and of course no rebounds. Goes on to say, and on offense, we need a big to get respect. Way too much pressure on the guards. And then says, turn on the St. John's game tonight and watch their defense. Didn't see anything close to that all year. Defense was just so soft. I feel like the word soft comes up a lot, Jim. Whether we're talking about rebounding, we're talking about defense. I can't remember too many teams this season where Pitt was the more physical team, where Pitt was the tougher team, where Pitt was the team that pushed the other team around. You know, particularly once it got out of the non-conference. It's just that's not their model. And maybe it was never going to be their model. You know what I mean? When you look at the players they have, like Zach Austin, like he does some pretty wild things, but I don't know if I'd necessarily describe him as like an intimidating physical player. You know, Ishmael Leggett is physical, but I don't know if he's that. He's not going to out physical guys playing defense. Lowe is not going to do it. Guillermo's not going to do it. Cam Corrin hasn't been able to do it. I don't think they're built to be a big, tough team. I don't know if they're necessarily finesse. And I don't want to be rude and call them soft, but it's kind of who they are, isn't it?
Yeah. And you were talking about like, you can't remember the last time they were, you know, the bigger, stronger physical team. And like going back to like me, like repeating like the same things I've been repeating for a month, but like they've never dictated a game this year. Like they've never gone into the game, and that's why they fall behind. Like where it's like, we're going to do what we want to do. Like everything they do is reactionary. Like how they substitute, how they play, how they do anything. Like they have no identity. Like I think that's like where I've landed on this team. There's not one thing they do really well, and there's not one thing they go into a game and say, we can beat you with this. I mean, at least last year's team, like if nothing else, Blake Hinson was going to fire up a bunch of threes, and you know sometimes they would go in. And I mean, shooting teams out of the gym is, I guess, a strategy or an identity. This team just doesn't have an identity, and whether that's not being strong enough, whether that's not really having a plan on offense at times, or not being good defensively, I just don't know what they've tried to be at all this season. And I would guess most people that watched them all year would have to say the same thing. Like, who are they?
17 games this year. How many times do you think they scored 40 or more points in the first half? 17 ACC games.
Twice.
One.
One.
North Carolina. They scored 42 in the first half against North Carolina. They were still losing 44-42 at halftime. The game they won against UNC. I don't see another game on here where they scored 40 or more points in the first half against an ACC opponent. They had 52 against Eastern or against Sam Houston and, all this and that. But like, it's just amazing. It's just, and you're right. Like I struggle also to find what this team's identity is. Pitwin says, just go all in on football. We want the basketball team to do good, but we don't really care. I think that's shown by the attendance numbers. It's funny because I feel like people usually say the opposite. Just go all in on basketball. You know what I mean? Like, you can win in basketball if you just get one or two good players. So devote all the NIL money. You know what it is? You know what it is, Jim? Whichever team is in season, people are convinced that you should donate all the money to the other team.
Yeah.
And go all in on that one. So it's going to be all in on football until we get to the fall, and then it's going to be all in on basketball again. So it's, whoever distance makes the heart grow fonder. Michael B is the super chatter again, says, what do you think Papa Amadou Conte's role is with the team will be next season? And do you see him developing into a Gary McGee type player? It probably depends on how you define a Gary McGee type player. Defense and rebounding, not a lot of offense. I guess so. Papa Amadou Conte is not as big and physical as Gary McGee. I like watching him play, though. I mean, he's sort of a ball of chaos out there. Not entirely disciplined, but that's kind of the fun of it. And, probably going to get like 3 or 4 fouls very quickly. And that's kind of the fun of it, too. So I hope he's got a role with the team next year. It might depend on whether or not Cam Corrin comes back. You know what I mean? If Cam Corrin comes back, Papa Amadou Conte might be like, all right, I'm not going to get a shot here, right? And, head off for greener pastures. But I like him. I hope he sticks around.
Yeah, I mean, he seems like a good role player. I mean, like, I can't imagine in his head, like, he's expecting to be a starter in the ACC next year. I mean, I think there's a lot to his game. Just even, like, the simple fundamental things of, like, catching, turning, and dunking. Like, I don't even know if he's really doing all that much this year. But I think part of it's the injury. Part of it's he's just like kind of a raw player. Missing an entire season whenever you're 18, 19 years old is not good for anyone's development. So, I mean, I think with more time, like the guy was a top 100 recruit or a 4-star committed to Michigan. Like there's some ability in there, but I do think the injury just kind of stunted him for a year. But like you said, this year he's a ball of energy, and like sometimes you could throw him out there and it works. So.
All right. Not to give away, any spoilers for Saturday, Jim, but are you going to take Pitt to win this game? Get the upset on Saturday in our staff picks?
No.
It's probably the best chance Pitt has if we all pick Louisville. You know what I mean? Like when there are these games where there might be an upset, it's very rare that like 4 of us pick the other team to win and one person picks Pitt and Pitt pulls off the upset. Like it usually doesn't happen. Usually we have to all be, a consensus, a unanimous opinion that Pitt is not going to win. So I guess we'll all pick Louisville. Are you going to pick them to win by a lot? You going to pick a blowout victory down there?
Yeah, I wonder what the spread's going to be. I mean, like if Pitt was a 9.5 point favorite over Georgia Tech, like you would have to think a top 20 Louisville team's going to be pretty highly favored over Pitt. I don't know. I mean, they played Louisville tough before.
Yeah, they did.
That's something, I guess.
They were only down like 6 in the first half, which is not much for this team. That's pretty good. Did you happen to see Damon Stoudemire's comments last night after the game?
Was it about the
point spreads?
Oh, no.
He talked about point spreads because somebody asked him a question. They're like, so, you guys were 4.5 point underdogs or something. And he's like, well, actually, it was like 8-point underdogs. And I never used to pay attention to that until I worked for Coach Miller at Arizona. And he goes on to talk about so he had talked earlier that like the whole thing in games, you have to find ways to trim off points. Like, okay, if we can get, and he was trying to make a point about how they kept Zach Austin and Guillermo Diaz-Graham from going off. And so they trimmed off points there. Those are guys that maybe combined, you're usually going to get 6 to 9 points out of. Well, they trimmed off those points. And so he's talking about that. And so he came back to that. He's like, so when I saw the spread was like 9 points, I'm like, okay, so, that we have to find a way to trim off like 9 points, and he wasn't entirely saying that his mindset is dictated by the point spread, but it is something he sort of thinks about to give him an idea of how they have to go into the game and what, how many. He kept saying how many points they had to trim, and he was like so close to saying how many points they have to shave off, but he didn't quite get there. But boy, he kept like towing around like this thing, but he talked more about point spreads than I've ever heard any coach talk about. It was really interesting, actually. He had a lot of good stuff. Like he was like, as you know, in the media room, they've got the big screens over here and they've got the box score on the screen. So he's talking, he's like, Jaland Lowe got, what he got? He got like 25 points. That's good, but he got it on like, it took him 21 shots. Like that's a win for us. Like that's good for us. If he's going to get that, he's like, and Leggett had 20, but like the reality is those guys are averaging like 16 each. That's what they get on like a bad night. So for us, like they get 20 and 25. All right, that's going to happen. The big thing for us was, he kept calling him Graham. But basically Guillermo Diaz-Graham and Zach Austin only going, combined 2 of 11 from 3. And it was really interesting. I was like, I hadn't really thought about that like, Lowe and Leggett are going to get theirs. So who are the guys who are actually going to beat you in the game? It's Zach Austin making 3 threes, or Guillermo making 3 or 4 threes, or Jorge or something like that. And so they really focused on that. Now, I think Guillermo and Austin just kind of bricked their shots last night. I think they had open looks. I think they had good shots and they just kind of bricked them. But it was interesting to hear his perspective on that. And the fact that he was basically like, I forget what he said, like Lowe had 25 points, but they weren't, at first he said they weren't dynamic points. And then he sort of amended it to like, they weren't impactful points. I'm like, he's kind of right. Like it's a unique perspective, but he's not wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you look at those two, it's like 12 for 35 combined. Like as an opposing team, yeah, I'll take 23 misses from those guys. That's fine.
Yeah, if Pitt is only going to average 1 point per Jaland Lowe shot, that's great. Like that's great. You will absolutely take that 1.5 points per shot from Lowe and Leggett combined. Yeah, you'll absolutely take it. All right, we're out of time here. I'm just going to talk football in the morning pit tomorrow. So if you guys want to tune in for that, it's just going to be some football talk because I'm nothing else to say about basketball, at least for now. But then I'm going to write about it in the 321 column on Friday. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you don't miss any of our pit video content. Of course, morning pit videos every day of the week. This weekly live show Wednesday nights at 8:30. Post-game shows, press conferences, interviews, and all those different things. You don't want to miss any of that. And, of course, check out Panther-Lair.com for all of our coverage from the games and everything else that we cover. Spring practice coming up, recruiting, all that kind of stuff. So, Benjamin Glazer wants Julian Duggar content. That's what spring camp is for, buddy. It's coming. It's coming. All right. Like and subscribe. Check out Panther-Lair.com. Thanks for all the comments and questions, Jim. Thanks for you. Thank you for your time tonight. Thanks to everybody for hanging out. We will catch up with you tomorrow for the morning pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.